Well, a good Monday afternoon to you. Nice to see you. The big story today, of course, our country downgraded. Good afternoon to you. I am Dylan Ratigan. A beautiful, a lovely spring Monday here in Midtown Manhattan. A perfect 72 and air conditioned in our cryogenic studio, I might add. But the outlook, stormy on Wall Street. Standard & Poor's revising its long-term view, its long-term opinion, if you will, on our country's ability to pay its bills. Simply put, the agency believes our massive and still ballooning debt puts the future stability of our economy in question. Closing bell on Wall Street right now, where, again, the markets respond to this sort of thing. Stocks have tumbled today on the news, albeit on a very light trading day as a result of the Jewish holiday. I should point out that price changes on days like today, it's funny business. But anyway, the Dow, the Nasdaq, and the S&P all were down substantially on news of this downgrade. If you're wondering what the street thinks about it, concern about the declining value of our dollar, which we continue to print. Sending gold to a new record today, nearly $1,500 an ounce. As I like to say, if you're long gold, you're short America, or at least short the U.S. dollar. And when gold hits a record, at least it gives you some sentiment. It can all be traced, of course, right back to Washington, where 2.5 years ago, our government made the decision to absorb the flawed finances, of us as Americans, of homeowners, of businesses, and most notably the banks. It's not the only issue, but boy, it was an opportunity. And now those very same pro-wrestling politicians are distracting us with a false debate about reducing our deficit. S&P analysts saying that they have very little confidence that the White House and Congress will reach an agreement before the 2012 elections. And by that point, they say it would be fiscal year 2014 before any measures on debt went into effect. Now, the White House calls the downgrade a political judgment, insisting it, quote, underestimates the ability of America's leaders to come together to address the difficult fiscal challenges facing our nation. But it cannot be ignored that we are a matter of days from hitting yet another debt ceiling and still miles apart from even admitting to our real problem, which once again centers on this alliance, unholy as I see it, between large businesses like banks, healthcare monopolies, energy companies, and our government. As long as that's in place, they make money, we get the bill. Joe Klein, political columnist with Time Magazine, joining us here in New York. Why does this matter, the downgrade? Well, because it shouldn't matter, by the way, but it matters because it may have some influence on interest rates and on the the savings of the elderly who have their money in stocks and bonds. You saw the market went down today. The reason why it shouldn't matter is that Standard & Poor's should have absolutely no credibility with any American, because these are the very same people who were taking those mortgage-backed securities that were filled with crap and rating them AAA. Rating them higher than they're now rating this country. I mean, and also as a political judgment, just the reporting I've been doing today, talking to some people in and around this gang of 6 senators who are coming up with a compromise, they're getting close. There's, for the first time
close to what?
Close to some kind of deal that they will put forward that
they can then carp about with.
Yeah, but the fact is that I've been doing this for a long time, 40 years, and this is really the first and most serious conversation I've seen taking place about deficit spending since the 90s, when they actually did something about it.
Am I wrong in when I look at this that the deficit is symptomatic of the problem? It's not the problem. At the root of the problem, we have unresolved healthcare issues, we have unresolved banking issues, we have unresolved energy and war issues, we have unresolved trade issues, all of which are driving into this crazy spending pattern.
We have serious economic problems, in part because the smartest kids go to Wall Street rather than actually making new products. But the fact is that this is something of a diversion from the immediate problems facing the country. And a lot of this deficit debate is a false one because it's easily solved. You pay for it. You go back to the Clinton tax rates of the 1990s. That's $700 billion over 10 years right there. You do some tax reform. I understand you could get another $1 trillion out of that. And then you're spending, $100 billion a year in Afghanistan.
I guess. Oh, hang on a second. Is that your phone?
No.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Hang on. Is somebody there? Hello?
Hello.
Hello?
Hello.
Is this Ron Paul by any chance?
Oh, yes. This is Ron. I wanted to call in and chat with you a little bit, if that's okay.
Joe, apparently Ron has our number. Congressman, it's a pleasure to be hearing from. I don't know if you heard the conversation I was having with Joe about the deficit as a symptom of America's problems. Not that it doesn't create problems, just like taking painkillers can have side effects. But the reason we have the deficit is more deeply rooted. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. But am I allowed to ask Joe a question?
Sure.
Joe said that he can't trust S&P because they always overrated those bad bonds. But could it be possible that they're overrating our government bonds in the past and the present? I think they should lower the rating for our debts.
I think the reason why they lowered the rate today is that Wall Street isn't very happy with the president right now. This is a political rating. I mean, you know, Congressman, that the conversation we're having now in Washington is a really serious one that might actually make some progress, as opposed to what we've had over the last decade.
Well, I guess that's where we disagree. That's why I think S&P is overrating, because I see the wishful thinking. But take, for instance, the difference between the Republican approach and the Democratic approach. Obama's budget said in the year 2016 that our national debt would be $20 trillion. The Republicans said, oh, no, we're going to have a revolution. We're going to slash it, and it's only going to be $19 trillion. Well, it has to end somewhere. You just can't do it. So I think we have to agree to go back to the basics, and I think there is a problem there. I don't like the idea of raising taxes, but I have a great deal of sympathy for the people who are complaining about those companies and banks who are ripping us off. So could we devise a tax system maybe that if you're making profits in the military-industrial complex or off the system, and you have if you have a certain percentage of income from the government, I'd think seriously about it. That's not true.
How about a transaction tax on derivatives? I mean, those are all phony. That's made off casino gambling.
I think the futures markets are legitimate. I'm talking about people.
Do you think that the credit default swaps were legitimate? That helped bring us to the crash in 2008?
I think it's a consequence of the monetary system, and that's their gambling, and some are truly trying to protect. So if you just talk about the future markets, there's a place for that, but there's no place for people making billions of dollars building weapons that we don't need to go to wars that we shouldn't be involved in. And why they should have war? Well, there's the place.
Let me ask you a question, Congressman. Let me ask you a question. Because I think you propose a very perplexing idea, an intriguing idea, which is a tax policy that recognizes that those who make money through productive capital in the private sector and those businesses that make money through no big government contracts, whether it's a military, industrial, a drug company, or a subsidized bank. How would that go over in D.C. if you were to walk into the room with a tax bill that pitched something like that?
Well, so far they haven't asked me too much for my advice there. That's why I give my advice outside or on a TV program, because I think they're a special interest. And you can't say they're, traditionally they say, oh, there's a Republican special interest. You can't do that. But who's setting up the corporations in the military? Oh, I mean the military as well as the medical industrial complex, because it's both parties. They run the show, and then the monetary system supports them both.
And I think that's what frustrates Joe, myself, you, Congressman, and so many people in America, is that this false division when it comes to issues of our deficit, our healthcare system, our banking system, our military system, between Democrats and Republicans is just that false. And it's almost transparently so to the vast majority of the people in this country.
Right.
Now, sure, we can talk about gay marriage. We can talk about abortion. There's lots of things to disagree about. But how do we organize outside of those two political parties? I'll put this question to both of you, first to you, Congressman, and then to you, Joe, to actually hold to account both political parties for their collusion to eliminate choice, competition, and price integrity, of real American freedom from health care, from the banking, from the things where that's happened. There's only 4 or 5 industries.
Well, I think you have to question what the role of government ought to be. The founders had an idea what it should be, and it wasn't to police the world, and it wasn't to tell us how to live our personal lives, and it wasn't to run the economy. So once the government does that, you get all these other problems, and then you get into who's going to pay for all this. So I think the role of government ought to be for the protection of liberty, guaranteeing contracts, protect property rights, give us sound money, and then I do believe we would thrive, and there'd be no incentive to come to Washington to get contracts.
Yeah, but you know, things are always more. I really love your point of view, and I love your clarity, and I love your integrity in expressing it. But things are always more complicated than what you say. I mean, our founding fathers, the first report that George Washington asked from his Treasury Secretary, Alexander Hamilton, was, how do we prevent the Brits from coming over and whomping us? And Alexander Hamilton came back with a report that Washington supported, called the Report on Manufacturers, which favored protectionism, which said we have to protect our national defense industries. So it was never as now. I'm not saying I'm a protectionist now.
But Jefferson would argue with him.
So there was
so
always
an argument going on for a long time.
There always was an argument. So our founding fathers weren't precisely libertarians.
Oh, no, that's why I think we should work on improving what they were presenting to us, because I think they presented a pretty good case, and as you say, they immediately defaulted and started messing it up. So the modern-day libertarian wants to pursue the free society that was introduced to us back in those times. No, we don't argue that they knew about it. They got into foreign intervention rather quickly, and but that doesn't mean that they were wrong in advising it and not giving us the authority to do what we do.
All right, listen, Congressman. Feel free to call us anytime.
Okay.
Anything occurs to you, and we got to get a picture of you. That, like, we got this headshot of you. It looks like your congressional. I'm sorry, Joe, I can't. We got to get a picture of you that's a little more, like popcorn or something. I don't want to feel like I'm looking at your high school, your graduating picture.
Well, I thank you for taking my call.
All right, thank you, Congressman. Joe, it's a pleasure. Ron Paul, Joe Klein from Time Magazine, a great conversation, guys. Thank you very much.